In the heart of Enugu, the bustling city of the East, there stood a hair salon that was always full. Vivian's Hair Haven was a place where women came from far and wide to have their hair styled by the best in the business. Vivian, a young and talented hairstylist, had built her salon from the ground up. Her hands seemed to possess a magical touch. Clients swore that her hands could weave beauty into their hair, and every style she created seemed to have a life of its own. People traveled from different towns just to sit in her chair. Her fame spread like wildfire, and she became one of the most sought-after hairstylists in the region. The salon was always busy, and Vivian's reputation continued to grow. But there was something strange about her success. She didn't quite understand why everything seemed to fall into place for her. Her business boomed without much effort, and her clients often spoke of her work as if it had some divine touch. Vivian was in her mid-20s, with glowing skin, an infectious smile, and dark, radiant hair that flowed like silk. She had a warm, welcoming presence that made everyone feel at ease. But despite her thriving business, there was an air of mystery surrounding her success. She didn't know why her salon was so popular or why she had such an undeniable gift. Little did she know, her talent wasn't entirely her own. From the moment she was 2 years old, Vivian had unknowingly entered into a spiritual marriage with a powerful ocean husband, a mysterious being from the deep. Vivian had always believed her talents and success came from her hard work and dedication. Little did she know, her life was intertwined with a powerful spiritual force that shaped her destiny. When she was only 2 years old, a pact had been made on her behalf by her ancestors, unbeknownst to her. This pact bound her to a mysterious being, an ocean husband, a spirit from the deep sea. The ocean husband wasn't just a regular spirit, he was a powerful entity of the waters, commanding respect from all who lived in the depths. He had the power to bestow gifts upon those he chose, and Vivian was one of the lucky, or cursed, few. As a child, Vivian had no memory of this union, but the ocean husband had been watching over her, waiting for the moment to claim his bride. Her rise to success as a hairstylist wasn't merely because of her natural talent, it was the ocean husband's doing. He opened doors for her, guiding the right clients to her salon at just the right time, making her hands incredibly gifted in the art of hairstyling. People came from far and wide to experience her work, and her salon flourished. But the price of this success was high, and Vivian had no idea what was happening behind the scenes. At night, when the world was asleep, the ocean husband would come to her in her dreams, sometimes in a vision, other times in a more tangible form. He would whisper to her, sometimes comforting her, sometimes controlling her, but always demanding her attention. His presence was overwhelming, and no matter how much Vivian tried to resist, she couldn't escape his grasp. Vivian's salon continued to thrive, her business growing at an unimaginable rate. Every client who sat in her chair would leave with a smile, praising her work and claiming that she had done something special to their hair. They would tell their friends and family, and soon, Vivian's reputation spread across the region. Celebrities, businessmen, and even politicians were among her regular clients. Her name was known, and people said she was the best at what she did. But despite her fame and the continuous flow of customers, Vivian couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. There were times when she would feel a cold chill, or hear the sound of waves crashing in her mind, as if the ocean itself was calling to her. She would look around her salon, at her clients, at her employees, and wonder if they knew something she didn't. It was almost as if her success wasn't just due to her hard work, but something far more powerful, a force beyond her control. She would wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, hearing the sound of waves crashing, only to find that no one was there. But the dreams, oh, the dreams, were the worst. Every night, the ocean husband would visit her, speaking to her in a deep, haunting voice. He would touch her in ways that confused her, pulling her deeper into a world she didn't understand. She had no idea who he was or why he had such power over her, but she couldn't shake the feeling that he was always watching, always waiting. Vivian couldn't help but notice the strange things happening to the men in her life. Every time she showed interest in a man, or went on a date, something would go terribly wrong. The men would suffer strange misfortunes, losing their jobs, businesses collapsing, or their health deteriorating. It was as if the ocean husband was punishing them for daring to get close to her. At first, Vivian thought it was just coincidence. But the pattern grew too strong to ignore. Chijioke, a man she had dated for a few weeks, lost his job soon after their last date. Another man, Ifani, saw his thriving business crash overnight. As each new man came into her life, Vivian noticed the same thing happening: they would suffer terrible misfortune. She had a deep conversation with her best friend, Amara, who worked as her apprentice at the salon. Amara noticed how unhappy Vivian had become and asked her what was going on. Vivian confided in her about the strange occurrences, the dreams, and the men who seemed to be cursed whenever they came near her. "I don't understand, Amara," Vivian said, shaking her head in frustration. "Every time I try to be with someone, they lose everything. I can't keep going like this. I don't even know what to believe anymore." Amara was silent for a moment before speaking, her face serious. "I think you're being controlled by something or someone. You need to find out what's really going on, Vivian. This isn't normal." Vivian had no idea what Amara meant, but she knew something had to change. She could no longer ignore the strange events, the feelings of being trapped, and the mysterious presence that hovered over her life. It was time to seek answers. Vivian's salon continued to flourish as the days passed. Her fame was undeniable. People were constantly talking about how her hands could turn the simplest hairstyle into a masterpiece. From braided crowns to intricate updos, every style seemed to have a life of its own. Clients would leave her salon with smiles, saying they had never experienced anything like it before. Yet, despite all the praise and adoration, Vivian began to feel an unsettling sense of emptiness inside. She couldn't shake the thought that something was off about her success. No matter how many new clients she took in, no matter how many transformations she performed, she always felt the pull of something greater, something mysterious. One evening, as she was closing the salon for the night, she looked around at the empty chairs and the mirrors reflecting her tired face. She had become so focused on her work, on keeping the business afloat, that she hadn't taken the time to stop and truly reflect on her life. Something told her that there was a price to all of this, and that price was starting to weigh on her. That night, as Vivian tried to sleep, the familiar sound of waves crashed in her mind. The ocean husband was near. Vivian's mind was no longer at peace. She knew that something beyond her understanding was at play. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt the presence of the ocean husband. In the silence of her room, the weight of his influence seemed to grow heavier. The spiritual connection she had with him was undeniable, but she couldn't understand it. His visits came in dreams at first, but soon they became more tangible. She could feel the coldness of the ocean air, smell the salt water, and hear the waves as if she was standing on the edge of a vast ocean. His voice would call to her in a whisper, urging her to give in to his presence. There were times when his touch felt gentle, comforting even, as though he were a protector watching over her. Other times, his touch was overwhelming, demanding, and possessive. "I am your husband, Vivian," he would say, his voice deep and resonant. "You are mine, and I have given you everything. You cannot escape me." These words echoed in her mind, filling her thoughts with confusion and fear. Vivian couldn't understand why she felt so drawn to this mysterious being from the ocean. She tried to resist, but every night, his influence grew stronger. Despite the unsettling dreams and the growing sense of being controlled, Vivian's business thrived. Clients came and left with praise for her work. Her hands, they said, were magic. She had created styles so intricate, so beautiful, that it was as if she was channeling something greater than herself. Her reputation reached the ears of high-profile clients, celebrities, politicians, and wealthy businessmen. Vivian's name became synonymous with perfection. Her salon became a place where the wealthy and influential gathered, all wanting a piece of her magical touch. Yet, as her success grew, so did the strange occurrences. She began noticing something odd about her clients. Some of them seemed unnaturally drawn to her. They would look at her in a way that made her feel uncomfortable, as if they saw something more than just a hairstylist. There were times when she felt as if her clients weren't just admiring her skill, but something darker, more hidden within her. She would try to convince herself that it was all due to her hard work, but deep down, she knew the truth. She had made a deal with something she didn't understand, and now it was controlling her life. As the weeks went on, Vivian's unease grew. Her once thriving business continued to attract new clients, but her personal life was becoming a mess. Every time she tried to form a romantic connection, something would go wrong. She couldn't escape the strange curse that seemed to follow her every move. You need to find out what's really happening, or you'll never have peace. Vivian knew Amara was right. She had to find the answers, no matter the cost. Vivian couldn't ignore the truth any longer. She was being controlled, not by her own will, but by something far more powerful. She had tried to push the strange occurrences out of her mind, but as time passed, it became harder to ignore the pattern of destruction surrounding the men in her life. It wasn't just her love life that was falling apart, her own mind was becoming a battlefield. She couldn't stop thinking about the ocean husband, the mysterious force that seemed to have her in its grasp. Her nights were filled with restless sleep, haunted by dreams of the ocean, its waves crashing against her mind, pulling her deeper into its depths. One night, after another failed date and the collapse of yet another man's business, Vivian broke down in tears. She felt lost, confused, and overwhelmed. The weight of her success no longer felt like a blessing, it felt like a curse. "I need help," she whispered to herself, as if the ocean husband could hear her thoughts. With no one else to turn to, she decided to visit a few churches. She had heard rumors of pastors and spiritual leaders who could help people like her, people trapped by dark forces, bound by spiritual pacts they didn't understand. She was desperate to break free from the ocean husband's grip, even if it meant facing her deepest fears. Vivian visited several churches in the area, speaking with pastors who claimed to have the power to deliver people from spiritual bondage. She attended prayer sessions, underwent fasting rituals, and sat through countless sermons on deliverance. But nothing seemed to work. Each time she left the church, she felt a small sense of relief, but by the time night fell, the ocean husband's presence would return. It was as if nothing could break the bond that had been formed when she was a child. At one church, she met a pastor who claimed to have the ability to exorcise spirits. After a long session of prayer, the pastor told her, "Your spirit is bound to something ancient and powerful. This is no ordinary affliction. You need to seek deeper help." The pastor's words shook Vivian. No one had ever spoken to her like that. What did he mean by something ancient and powerful? Could it really be the ocean husband? Vivian felt like she was running out of options. No matter how hard she prayed or how many times she attended church, the hold on her life was too strong. She felt isolated, helpless, and scared. But deep down, she knew she couldn't give up. There had to be someone who could help her, someone who could break the spiritual chains that held her. One afternoon, as she sat in the salon, pondering her next steps, Amara approached her. She had been quiet for some time, but now she spoke with a sense of urgency. "Vivian, I've heard of someone who can help you." Vivian looked up, surprised. Who? Who can help me?" "I've tried everything, Amara. Nothing works." No pastor can break this. Amara's eyes narrowed with determination. There is a man of God, a powerful one, who lives in a neighboring village. His name is Pastor Freddy. He is known for performing miracles and breaking spiritual bonds that others cannot. People say he has the power to fight the strongest forces. Vivian felt a flicker of hope. Pastor Fred? Yes, Amara replied. I've heard stories of how he helped people in similar situations. He's the one you need to see. I know it's risky, but if anyone can break this, it's him. Vivian hesitated. It felt like her last chance. Do you think he can help me? I believe he can, Amara said softly. But you need to be willing to face whatever comes. This is not going to be easy. Vivian looked out the window, at the busy street filled with life. She had built everything she had, her business, her reputation, on the grace she didn't even fully understand. But now it was crumbling. And if there was a chance that Pastor Fred could break the chains that bound her, she had to take it. There was no turning back. That night, Vivian made up her mind. She and Amara would travel to the neighboring village to find Pastor Fred. She couldn't continue living like this, trapped in a world controlled by an ocean spirit, cursed by a success she never truly earned. It was time to confront the truth and face whatever lay ahead. The next morning, they set off. Vivian's heart raced as she thought of the potential outcomes. Would Pastor Fred truly be able to help her? Or would the ocean husband fight back, stronger than ever? As they journeyed toward the village, the air grew heavier. It felt as though the very wind was aware of their mission, whispering warnings in her ears. But Vivian kept walking, determined to find answers. The village was small, nestled between hills and thick forests. As Vivian and Amara approached the village, the sounds of nature filled the air. It was peaceful here, but there was an eerie sense of anticipation. Vivian couldn't help but feel that something monumental was about to happen. When they arrived at the small church where Pastor Fred was known to hold services, they were greeted by a tall, calm man with a deep presence. Pastor Freddy had an aura about him, one that instantly put Vivian at ease. His gentle smile and piercing eyes seemed to see right through her, as if he already knew the troubles that plagued her. Welcome, Pastor Fred said, his voice calm and reassuring. I've been expecting you, Vivian. Vivian felt a chill run down her spine. He knew her name. He knew she was coming. It was as though he had already been made aware of the battle she was facing. Will you be able to help me? Vivian asked, her voice filled with desperation. Pastor Fred nodded solemnly. I can help, but you must understand this will not be easy. The spirit you are bound to is a powerful one, and it will not relinquish its hold without a fight. But you must trust in your faith, in your strength, and in the belief that you can break free. Vivian took a deep breath. She had heard of the power of Pastor Fred's prayers, but she had no idea what to expect. Amara stood by her side, her face filled with hope. Sit, Pastor Fred said, motioning to a chair in the middle of the room. We will begin. Pastor Fred began to pray, his words echoing through the room in a deep, rhythmic chant. Vivian closed her eyes, trying to focus on the prayer, but her mind was filled with doubt. The ocean husband had been a constant presence in her life, and now she was about to confront him head-on. Could she really break free? As the pastor prayed, the atmosphere in the room grew heavier. Vivian felt a cold, salty breeze blow through the open window, as if the ocean itself were responding to the spiritual battle unfolding. Her heart began to race. It was happening, the ocean husband was aware of what was going on. The room began to feel colder, and the wind picked up, swirling around them. Vivian's hands trembled as she held onto the chair, her eyes closed tightly. The ocean husband's presence was unmistakable. She could hear the faint sound of waves crashing against rocks in the distance, and she felt a cold touch on her shoulder, as if the spirit were right behind her. Pastor Fred's voice grew louder, and his words became more forceful. In the name of the Almighty, I break every chain, every bond that holds this woman captive. You have no power here. I command you to leave her soul. Vivian could feel the tension in the air, the pressure building as the ocean husband fought to hold on to her. His voice echoed in her mind, deep and threatening. You belong to me, Vivian, he whispered. You cannot escape. I gave you everything. You are mine. The room shook as the ocean husband's influence grew stronger. The air was thick with the salty scent of the ocean, and Vivian could feel herself being pulled towards something deep and dark. It felt like she was being dragged underwater, pulled by an invisible force. She gasped for breath, her chest tightening as if she were drowning. But Pastor Freddy was unshaken. He continued to pray, his voice steady and powerful. You are not in control here. The power of the Most High is greater than you. Leave her, spirit of the ocean. I command you to depart. Vivian felt a strange sensation, as though she were fighting against a powerful current. The ocean husband's grip on her tightened, but it began to loosen, little by little. She focused on Pastor Fred's words, willing herself to break free from the ocean's hold. Suddenly, the pressure lifted. Vivian gasped, feeling as though she had just surfaced from deep water. The room grew still, and the cold breeze faded. She opened her eyes to find Pastor Fred standing over her, his hands raised in prayer. It's not over yet, he said quietly, but there was a sense of relief in his voice. You are stronger than you know, Vivian. You can break free from this spirit. But we must continue. The battle between good and evil was far from over. As the days passed, the spiritual warfare continued. Vivian felt the ocean husband's influence weakening, but the fight was far from easy. At night, she would still hear his voice in her dreams, his whispers growing more frantic as he realized his control over her was slipping away. You cannot defeat me, he would say. I have given you everything you need. You owe your success to me. You are nothing without me. Vivian's faith, however, remained strong. With Pastor Fred's guidance, she learned to trust in her own strength. She began to realize that her success wasn't just due to the ocean husband's blessings, it was because of her own hard work, talent, and determination. One night, as the spiritual battle intensified, Vivian felt a surge of courage. She stood firm, closing her eyes and taking a deep breath. I am not yours, she said aloud, her voice strong and unwavering. I am free. I belong to myself. The ocean husband's presence faltered. For the first time, Vivian felt the grip on her soul loosen entirely. The final confrontation between Pastor Freddy and the ocean husband came when the forces of good and evil clashed in a powerful storm of water and light. Vivian stood at the center of the spiritual battlefield, her heart filled with determination. She had made it this far, she couldn't go back now. With a final prayer, Pastor Freddy called upon the power of the Almighty, and the ocean husband was cast out, his hold on Vivian broken once and for all. The waves of darkness receded, and Vivian felt the chains that had bound her for so long snap and fall away. Vivian opened her eyes and took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the ocean husband's power lift from her shoulders. For the first time in years, she felt free. Vivian sat in silence after the final confrontation. The air was still, as though the world itself was holding its breath. The oppressive weight that had been hanging over her for so long had finally lifted. But as the reality of her newfound freedom settled in, a sense of loss began to creep in. She had fought hard to free herself from the ocean husband's grip, but there was a cost to her liberation. It wasn't just the spiritual chains that had been broken, there were tangible consequences that she now had to face. The next morning, When she opened the doors of Vivian's hair haven, the atmosphere was different. The salon, which had once buzzed with the constant flow of clients, was eerily quiet. She glanced around at the empty chairs, the mirrors reflecting only her own uncertain gaze. For the first time, Vivian realized that the salon was no longer the thriving business it once was. The familiar faces of her regular clients were nowhere to be found. The magic, the energy that had once seemed to come so easily, was gone. Her heart sank as she realized that the ocean husband's influence had not only shaped her life but had also been the driving force behind her success. Without him, her once booming salon was now struggling. Amara, who had been by Vivian's side throughout the entire ordeal, entered the salon, her face filled with concern. She had noticed the same thing: clients no longer flocked to the salon as they once had. "It's happening, isn't it?" Amara asked softly, her voice filled with sympathy. "The magic is gone." Vivian nodded, feeling a lump form in her throat. "I don't know what to do, Amara. I've lost everything. My success, it was all tied to him. I don't know if I can keep going without that power." But Amara, ever the optimist, placed a reassuring hand on Vivian's shoulder. "You've always had the talent, Vivian. The ocean husband may have opened doors for you, but it was your skill and your heart that made your work special. Don't forget that." As the days passed, Vivian found herself faced with the harsh reality of rebuilding her life. The salon, once filled with clients, was now barely making ends meet. Word of mouth no longer worked in her favor, and she struggled to bring in new customers. It felt as if she had lost everything that had once made her successful. Clients who had once praised her work now walked past her salon without a second glance. The familiar faces of regular customers were replaced by unfamiliar ones, many of whom were not impressed by her abilities. It was as if the magic that had once flowed through her hands had disappeared entirely. One evening, after a long day of empty chairs and dwindling profits, Vivian sat in the middle of her salon, staring at the empty space around her. She had always prided herself on her work, but now, it felt as though she was just another hairstylist in a city filled with them. She had to confront the truth: her success had never been truly hers. It had been a gift, or perhaps a curse, from the ocean husband. Without him, she was left to rebuild her life from scratch. The process of rebuilding was not easy. Vivian's heart ached as she tried to find a new purpose without the supernatural force that had once shaped her destiny. She felt lost, unsure of where to turn next. But Amara, ever faithful and supportive, encouraged her to keep going. "We'll make it through this, Vivian," Amara said one evening as they cleaned up the salon after another quiet day. "We've got each other, and you've got the skills. We'll rebuild this together." Slowly, but surely. Vivian's eyes filled with tears, but she managed a small smile. She had spent so much time relying on the ocean husband's power that she had forgotten the most important thing: her own strength. It was time to rediscover who she was without relying on external forces. The next few weeks were tough. Vivian took on smaller jobs, doing hair for weddings, parties, and personal clients. Slowly, word of mouth began to spread again, but this time it wasn't because of any supernatural force, it was because of her skill, her hard work, and the passion she had for her craft. Each day, Vivian found herself regaining a sense of purpose. The salon began to attract new clients, ones who appreciated her for the talent she had always possessed. It wasn't the same as before, but it was real. And that, to Vivian, was enough. Amara continued to stand by Vivian, supporting her through the difficult process of rebuilding her business. She had never wavered in her belief that Vivian was capable of more than just the ocean husband's gifts. Amara had always seen the true strength in Vivian, the drive, the passion, and the creativity that made her stand out from the rest. "I'm proud of you, Vivian," Amara said one evening as they sat together in the salon after closing time. I always knew you were meant for something special. Now, you're proving it. Vivian smiled, feeling the warmth of Amara's words. I couldn't have done it without you, Amara. You've been my rock through all of this. Thank you. Amara grinned. That's what friends are for. But remember, you've always had the magic. It was never the ocean husband, it was always you. Vivian felt a surge of confidence. She was starting to see herself differently now. The ocean husband's grip on her life was gone, and she was free to create her own success. It wasn't easy, but with Amara's support and her own determination, she knew she could rebuild everything. In the midst of rebuilding, Vivian's heart began to heal. She started meeting new people, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like she could have a normal relationship without the interference of the ocean husband. One day, she met a kind man named Chibuzo, a local artist who shared her passion for creativity and self-expression. Their connection was immediate, and Vivian felt a warmth she hadn't experienced in years. Chibuzo didn't judge her for her past, nor did he try to exploit her success. He saw her for who she truly was, a strong, independent woman who had overcome incredible odds. As they spent more time together, Vivian felt herself falling in love again, this time, with someone who didn't carry the weight of dark forces around him. She realized that true love wasn't about what someone could offer her, it was about connection, trust, and mutual respect. Vivian's business continued to grow, albeit at a slower pace. But this time, it was because of her hard work and the genuine love of her craft. She had found a new sense of fulfillment, both in her work and in her life. The ocean husband's presence no longer haunted her, and she felt free to live her life on her terms. However, just when she thought her life had returned to normal, a surprising twist emerged. One evening, after closing the salon, Vivian received a message from a number she didn't recognize. It was a simple text, "The ocean never forgets." Vivian's heart skipped a beat. She looked at the message, unsure of what to make of it. Was this a threat from the ocean husband, or was it someone else? She didn't know, but she had come too far to let fear control her life again. Vivian had thought she was free. She had broken the chains, found peace, and started rebuilding her life. Her salon was growing again, her heart was healing, and her relationship with Chibuzo blossomed. But as the days passed, an unsettling feeling began to gnaw at her. The ocean husband's last words echoed in her mind, "The ocean never forgets." The strange message she received that night only deepened her anxiety. Vivian couldn't shake the feeling that the ocean husband was still lurking somewhere, waiting to reclaim what he believed was his. Despite Pastor Fred's victory, she wasn't sure if she could ever truly escape his reach. Her worst fears were confirmed one evening when, as she was locking up the salon, the windows rattled, and the air around her became inexplicably cold. The once familiar smell of salt water filled the air, and Vivian's heart raced as she looked around, sensing an all-too-familiar presence. Suddenly, the vision appeared, a figure shrouded in mist, with glowing eyes and a deep, rumbling voice. The ocean husband. "You thought you could escape me," he said, his voice a mixture of fury and melancholy. "But I will never let you go. You belong to the ocean. You will always belong to me." Vivian felt a shiver run down her spine. His presence was suffocating, the air thick with his power. It was as though she were drowning again, pulled by invisible currents back into the depths of his control. "I don't belong to you," Vivian whispered, her voice shaking with both fear and newfound resolve. "I've broken free. I am no longer your prisoner." The ocean husband laughed, a hollow, terrifying sound. "You think you can break free from me? You are nothing without me. All you have now is this small life you've created. Your business, your love, there will be nothing without the power I gave you." As his words echoed in the salon, Vivian felt the space around her begin to shift. The world seemed to melt away, and she found herself standing at the edge of a vast, dark ocean. The waves crashed violently, and she felt herself being pulled towards the water, as though the ocean was calling her back into its depths. But this time, Vivian was different. She wasn't the same scared girl who had once been helpless in the face of the ocean husband's power. The battle that Pastor Fred had started was far from over, and Vivian had grown stronger. She had discovered her own strength, her own power, and it was time to stand her ground. The ocean husband surged toward her, his form rising from the depths like a towering wave. "You cannot resist me, Vivian. You are mine. Your hands, your heart, your soul, they belong to the ocean. You were sold to me when you were young." But Vivian stood firm, feeling the warmth of her own strength surge through her. She had faced the ocean husband once before, and she would not allow him to claim her again. "I am not yours," she declared, her voice ringing with defiance. "I belong to myself. I will not let you control me any longer." A great battle raged in the spiritual realm, waves of darkness crashing against waves of light. Vivian could feel the ocean husband's power pulling at her, but she refused to give in. With every ounce of strength, she pushed back, remembering the love she had for her work, her friends, and her new life with Chibuzo. These were the things that truly mattered. As the battle raged on, Vivian felt her connection to the ocean husband begin to fray, the bond weakening with each passing moment. With a final, determined cry, she called upon the strength she had discovered within herself, the power of her own soul, untainted by the ocean's dark influence. "I am free," she said, her voice strong and unwavering. "I am free, and I will never go back." She started praying and speaking in tongues. Meanwhile, Pastor Fred felt the battle and started praying for more strength to Vivian. The ocean husband's form began to dissipate, his power retreating back into the depths. The storm of waves and darkness calmed, and Vivian felt the last remnants of his hold over her vanish. For the first time, she felt completely free, no longer bound by the ocean, no longer controlled by his power. When Vivian opened her eyes, she found herself back in her salon. The air was still, the familiar scent of hair products and wood filling the room. The cold, salty air was gone, and the salon was once again peaceful. She breathed a deep sigh of relief, her heart finally at ease. The ocean husband was gone, his influence over her had been completely severed. Vivian had fought for her freedom, and she had won. She couldn't help but smile as she looked around her salon. It wasn't the same as before, but it was hers. It was a place where she could create, a place where she could be herself without the shadow of the ocean husband hanging over her. The clients who had once drifted away began to return, sensing the new energy in the salon. Vivian had rediscovered the true source of her success, her own skill, her own heart. In the weeks that followed, Vivian's life continued to improve. Her salon regained its popularity, but this time it was different. The success she had worked for was hers, earned through dedication, love, and passion for her craft. She didn't need the ocean husband's power to thrive. She had found her own strength, and she was determined to build a life on her own terms. As she sat with Chibuzo one evening, watching the sunset from the salon's window, she knew that she was finally free. The love they shared was real, untainted by any supernatural forces. It was a love that grew from trust, respect, and mutual understanding. Vivian had come full circle. She had faced the darkness, fought for her freedom, and now she was ready to live a life that was truly her own. The ocean husband, once a force that controlled her every move, was now nothing more than a distant memory, a reminder of the strength she had gained. With a heart full of hope, Vivian looked ahead to the future, knowing that no matter what came her way, she was strong enough to face it. Vivian's journey had been one of struggle and growth, but in the end, it was a journey towards self-discovery. She had learned that true strength came from within, that it was not the external forces or powers that defined her, but the power of her own soul, her own will. The ocean husband had tried to take everything from her, but Vivian had reclaimed her life, her success, and her happiness. And in doing so, she had learned one of the most important lessons of all, that freedom, true freedom, comes when we break free from the chains that bind us, whether they are physical, emotional, or spiritual. Vivian smiled as she looked out the window, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. Her journey had been long, but it had led her to this moment of peace. And with that peace came the knowledge that she was finally in control of her own life. With the ocean husband's grip finally gone, Vivian found herself living in a way she had never experienced before, free. Her heart was lighter, and for the first time in years, she could see the world without the looming shadow of supernatural control. Her love life, once tainted by the curses of the ocean husband, began to flourish, thanks to her renewed sense of self and the unwavering support of Chibuzo. The bond between Vivian and Chibuzo had grown stronger. It was more than just a simple romance, it was a deep connection, rooted in trust, respect, and understanding. Chibuzo was the one person who had seen her through her darkest moments without judging her for what she had gone through. He loved her for who she was, not for the magic that had once defined her. One evening, as they sat together in the salon, the setting sun casting golden light across the room, Chibuzo turned to Vivian with a smile that made her heart flutter. "Vivian," he began, his voice steady but filled with warmth, "I've seen you grow. I've watched you fight for your freedom, your happiness, and your future. And I know that no matter what, you are the strongest woman I've ever met. I want to spend the rest of my life with you." Vivian felt a rush of emotions, joy, love, and a deep sense of gratitude. She had never felt more sure of anything in her life. Chibuzo wasn't just asking for a relationship, he was offering a future, a shared journey of love and support. He knelt down before her, holding out a small box. As the box opened, the soft sparkle of a diamond ring caught her eye. "Vivian, will you marry me? Will you build a life with me, a life that's free from any force that's ever tried to control you?" Vivian's heart soared, her eyes filling with tears of happiness. The love she felt for Chibuzo had only deepened over time, and now, she knew that this was the love she had been waiting for, unconditional and free from any dark forces. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, Chibuzo, I will marry you. I've been waiting for a love like this, for someone who sees me for who I am. And I am ready to spend the rest of my life with you." Chibuzo slipped the ring onto her finger, and as they embraced, Vivian knew that this was the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter filled with love, hope, and the promise of a future built on mutual respect and trust. Vivian and Chibuzo's wedding was a celebration of love and new beginnings. The ceremony took place in the heart of Enugu, surrounded by friends and family who had watched Vivian grow through her trials. The guests marveled at the beautiful bride, radiant and free, walking down the aisle with a smile that reflected the strength she had found within herself. Amara, who had been Vivian's closest friend and support through her journey, stood beside her as her maid of honor. As the two exchanged vows, there was an unspoken understanding between them. Amara had been with Vivian through her darkest days, and now she stood by her side as she entered the most joyful chapter of her life. The reception was filled with music, laughter, and dancing. The salon, once a place of struggle and uncertainty, now symbolized a new beginning. Vivian's success, her love, and her freedom were all hers, earned by her strength and determination, and sealed by the love she shared with Chibuzo. As the night came to a close, Vivian stood beside her new husband, looking out at the stars above. The ocean, once a looming presence in her life, was now nothing more than a distant memory. She had broken free from its grip, found true love, and built a future based on the things that truly mattered. Vivian's journey had been long and difficult, but it had led her to a place of peace and fulfillment. She had learned that true happiness came not from external forces or magical gifts, but from within. She had discovered her own strength, her own worth, and had built a life with the person she loved. As she stood with Chibuzo, hand in hand, she realized that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Her life was no longer dictated by the ocean husband's power, but by the love she shared with Chibuzo and the happiness they would build together. Vivian smiled, her heart full of joy, knowing that the ocean was no longer a force that controlled her fate. She was the master of her own destiny, and with Chibuzo by her side, there was nothing they couldn't overcome. Vivian's story was one of transformation. She had started as a woman caught in a spiritual marriage that controlled every aspect of her life. But through strength, faith, and the love of a good man, she had broken free. She had learned that success, happiness, and love were not things that could be forced or controlled by external powers, they were the result of her own choices and actions. Her journey was a reminder that no matter how dark the road may seem, there is always a way to reclaim one's life, one's future, and one's happiness. Vivian had found her freedom, and in doing so, had discovered the most important truth of all, that the greatest love and success come from within. And that, my friends, was Vivian's powerful journey from spiritual bondage to true freedom and love. But what would you have done if you were in Vivian's shoes? Do you believe in spiritual marriages like this? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more thrilling African stories, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next jaw-dropping tale. Trust me, the next one will leave you speechless.